The Journey of Elaina is one of the most interesting anime from this fall season, and I'm actually happy to say that this year of 2020 ended on a good note for anime in general, despite the events that are currently happening in our world. Some anime were filled with fighting scenes and amazing display of action filled with thrilling and exciting moments. Others were more focused on emotions and friendship, or even comedy with entertainment for hours and hours. But when it came down to the Journey of Elaina, it was all about the adventure and wonder, about a little girl that became a witch with the purpose of traveling around the world. And today, we're going to talk about Elaina's journey and how this anime is, in my opinion, one solid contender for the best anime of the year. Ever since she was a child, it was Elaina's dream to become a witch. She would read countless books about magic, about Nikke's adventure, who used to be a famous traveling witch, and also wanting to learn more and more about magic, devouring as much knowledge as possible. One day, the time arrived where she would need to find a mentor in order to become a witch. However, since she was the youngest apprentice in the country, it would be quite the challenge to find one. But not until she meets Flan, in which accepts and takes Elaina as her apprentice. This anime show elevates itself above your typical cliché adventure in a fantasy world. Even though the premise is simple, the execution is, however, the example that you don't really need an overarching plot in order to be a concise and yet enjoyable story. As the show's title suggests, it is all about Elaina's journey, and the anime, well, does just that. Elaina becomes an apprentice, trains with her mentor, becomes a witch, and goes on a journey. The story does not follow a deep plot, as for each episode we experience a small portion of Elaina's long-lasting adventure, jumping left and right around different places. Whether it be gorgeous and unending landscapes, or towns with interesting buildings, with diverse architecture, with townsfolk from different races, and each with their own unique stories, we viewers accompany Elaina on her journey and witness how the main character leaves her mark in every place she visits and how she shapes up as a person. Yes, she started this adventure of hers at the age of 14, and as of the episode 10, 4 years have passed as she would become 18. So here we have quite the time lapse in how long she actually traveled and is still traveling. When it comes to Elaina herself, she's the main figure of the show, as you might have guessed, and I am glad the writers gave this beautiful cheeky girl a unique and complex personality. In the very first episode, Elaina is taken under Flan's wing, and the poor girl thought she would start up learning the basics of magic spells and all things in between. However, we quickly realized that Flan's first month of mentoring was nothing more than giving tedious chores to Elaina, taking advantage of her to do all sorts of tasks, and to our poor apprentice, she had to endure it all, being a complete pushover, as she knew how hard it had been to find a mentor in the first place. Until one day, Elaina reaches the boiling point. Our mentor, noticing the pain she had gone through, she finally decides to debut Elaina's first lesson, only to humiliate her when facing off against our dear apprentice with an amazing display of magic abilities from our Stardust Witch, leaving Elaina in a complete state of overwhelm, chaos, and meltdown. Of course, Elaina just wanted to learn and be accepted, and for that she endured everything thrown at her. After letting it all out, Elaina is told by her mentor that it was her parents that asked our dear Flan to do this to their own child. I mean, shouldn't she feel ashamed of having such parents treating her in such a way? But the lesson here was simply to teach Elaina about failure and the concept of struggle in life. As it is apparent, Elaina never went through any particular struggles in her life, besides, you know, trying to find a mentor, but real failure was never in her dictionary, and maybe, as some of our parents did to us in our past experience, was simply to teach a life lesson, which is very important for everyone when we are young, and our dear apprentice was no exception, to teach her the taste of defeat, but to persevere through the hardships, and Elaina was able to prove herself to be only one of great talent, but also a mindful and self-aware person capable of listening and to be humble when there needs to be. Despite all of this, Elaina also learns not to bear too much with her, and so be less of a pushover and be frank about her true feelings. And let me tell you, she understood the lesson immediately, revealing her true personality right after, being a charming young lady, true, but also being a boorish and extremely sarcastic girl, ready to be critical towards other people, revealing her true feelings whenever necessary. Even though the first episode was a very good one, hence the importance of providing us viewers with a very first well-made episode, I obviously got glued to the story and to the following adventures. After the graduation, Elaina was named the Ashen Witch, talk about original titles here, and finally this young girl goes on her adventure. Like I mentioned before, the story does not have an intrigue nor a complex plot with an ending destination. Instead, it is all about Elena's journey and the importance of it to her as a person. By reading the synopsis, you would think this anime is a colorful and happy fantasy world about a superficial main character that goes on a journey. But you are wrong. This anime emphasizes on the fact that the world that Elaina lives in is pretty much like ours, with real issues, crimes, people with their own problems, and let me tell you, some of the people had some wicked stories to tell. Like for example, the really young maid in the nobleman's house and how the story indirectly tells us that she was being abused by her own boss, how she was quote-unquote enslaved, and yes, I say enslaved because slavery is a thing in this world, or how a princess was victim of severe amnesia from her childhood, only to later on find out that it was her father's doing, as she decides to mercilessly kill him, including cutting off his head, or even the story about another witch that goes back in time with Elaina in order to save the childhood friend that she was forced to kill in the present time, simply because of her traumatic experience when her parents were presumably killed years ago by some random burglar, in which made her friend become a complete psycho killer, or so she was told, but in reality, her friend was the one responsible for her own parents' death because she was being abused by them, and how this witch went back in time only to kill her friend once again. All of these small tales that we witness throughout Elena's journey are illustrations of how realistic this fantasy world is, despite its breathtaking landscapes and its fantasy aspects. The way the story is presented with small episodic tales about the world surrounding our main character and how Elaina matures with time and learns from her experience is the strong aspect of this anime, simply because there's always a unique story every single episode, with not only interesting tales but also presenting enthralling points about the lore, about the world, and the way the people live. Sometimes one could judge Elaina for not intervening in some situation she had been put into, but I believe that's precisely the most interesting part about her personality. I'm not sure if the author had the intention of portraying a main character's personality that would mimic a behavior of a real human being. But to be frank, in some of the examples I had previously mentioned, I would simply do the same and not interfere with other people's life even if it was wrong, like the maid in the nobleman's house, or the young princess who displayed a behavior of insanity towards the end of the episode after killing her own father, simply because it is not her place to try to change the course of things, or because it has nothing to do with her. But at the same time, it served to convey Elena's reaction towards these situations, emphasizing on her opinion or feelings towards what she had experienced and how it shaped her as a person. Overall, this anime was such a big surprise, despite it being a little bit underwhelming and cliché during the first 2 episodes of Elena's journey, where presumably nothing was happening, following the generic path of a girl going on an adventure in a fantasy world. The ability to illustrate real-time situations and people with twisted minds, emphasizing on real problems, was the triggering point that caught my full attention, and it didn't disappoint, to be honest. On a more technical aspect, if we look at the animation itself, the landscapes are amazing with astounding art style. Elaina herself has a very unique design, as well as the supporting characters, being able to fully characterize the people according to the theme and era, which seems to be a medieval one. If you don't know Majo no Tabitabi, it is made by C2C Animation Studios, and their record isn't very well known in the community, but honestly, to my surprise, I have to say that they did an amazing job, with consistent animation, with good illustrations about the world, with colorful designs and interesting soundtracks. If you are up to date with episode 10, we learned more about Flan and Sheila's background, as they were students of the infamous Nikkei. Now, as of the recording of this video, there is no concrete evidence about Nikkei being Eleina's mother or not, but I believe all of us have our suspicions. Therefore, I won't be affirming that Nikkei is indeed Eleina's mother, but they really look similar and it would make sense if she was, despite the fact that Eleina's mother didn't seem to know Flan in the beginning. And her understanding of Eleina's journey and how much importance it is for her daughter, it makes me believe she used to be a traveler of some sort. But I guess by the time this video airs, the mystery has been already unraveled. Or maybe not, I guess I'll have to wait and see. There's currently 16 volumes of this incredible story, and I'm really tempted to read everything, considering I'm really enjoying this story. I hope there's a continuation to this series, even though many animes serve merely as a promotional pipeline of the reading materials. The journey of Elaina was an incredibly positive surprise to me, hence the reason I would totally recommend it to anyone that enjoys a simple and yet thrilling and interesting adventure with amazing illustrations about the lore, about the world, and about the three-dimensional main character such as our dear Elaina. And with this, guys, my final verdict about Majo no Tabitabi, also known as the Journey of Elaina, will be a score of 9 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching today's video, I hope you enjoyed. As you probably noticed, there will be no weekly anime news, as I did announce it on my Discord server about the reasons behind it, and if you have not done so, you can join my Discord channel, link in the description. Stay tuned for next week's video, as I will be announcing my top 3 anime for the fall season of this year, and don't forget to watch your daily dose of anime because it's good for your brain and heart. Take care, and I'll see y'all in the next video.